So, official welcome with the slides in the background. I'm representing the European Training Foundation, a European Union agency based in Torino, and I'm here not alone, but with a fantastic group of partners, the International Council for Open and Distance Education, and two institutes from UNESCO, UNEVOC, the Institute for Vocational Education and Training, and the UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning. This is I would say, a fluid partnership. Actually, I wanted to show you what happened in the last years. Let's say, the people behind the screens from these organizations, we strongly believe in open education and OER, open educational resources, as a way to, let's say, foster inclusiveness and innovation in any sector. So more or less every 6 months, every year, we organize one webinar, and in different constellations. So you can see in this slide the webinars we did. The first one was focusing on teachers and trainers. The second was focusing specifically on vocational training. The third one was focusing on TVET, but with a strong push on accessibility and affordability. And then one we organized with some of you, actually this month, for the Open Education Week, was focusing geographically on the South Mediterranean region. All of these are linked. You can then, when you get the slides, you can check them. You have the recordings, the presentation, and the idea is really to keep the discussion alive and to, let's say, present a bit of practices and a bit of successful ideas that can foster the adoption of OER. As I was saying before, this is the story of a rather successful cooperation, and I'm putting here three websites of three of these of the actors around the table, around the virtual table. And the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning is not there, but in the next one you're going to be there if you want. So here you see the portal by UNESCO-UNEVOC, a collection of open educational resources in TVET, a sector that highly needs actually open education and open educational resources. You see a link to the ICDE Open Education Network, and maybe Rob, you can say a word about that when you will speak in a moment. And then you see our ETF database of innovative teaching practices, where a lot of these resources and practices actually are OER, or sort of openly licensed or openly accessible content. So there are a few things that, let's say, are gravitating around these webinars. One word about the agenda of today. After my introduction, I'm going to give the floor to Rob Farrow from the Open University UK and from the ICDE Open Education Network for a bit of a context. The webinar today tries to focus on open education in a lifelong learning perspective. So we try to go beyond sectors, beyond higher education, where there are many things happening in terms of open education and OER. Less are happening in vocational training, a sector that we are particularly interested in. But here today we try to look for practices and ideas beyond the sector, so in a lifelong learning perspective. Then after Rob, we are going to hear three practices, three real-life cases. The first one, identified by UNEVOC, is going to be from Korea, and it's about the Korea Open Courseware. I'll tell a bit later about that. The second is going to be from the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, and is going to be about the UNESCO Learning City of Bonn in Germany, so how a city can use OER to foster lifelong learning. And the third is going to be about Lebanon and about the OER Lebanon initiative, and about how a country, let's say, can also is pushing for OER again beyond sectors. If we are good, if we keep the timing, we will have some 20 minutes to share ideas and to see if what we can do in the future to further foster these discussions and this knowledge sharing, and also hearing from you if you have some specific case in mind and or some specific possible activity for the future. And we promise that by 3:30 sharp we will close. We are very aware of how much your time is precious. And finally, after the webinar, all the presentations and the recording of the webinar is going to be available in this page. Let me do a mini spot. This page and the webinar for the ETF is part of our community of innovative educators. So when you access the webinar, you will also have the possibility to register there and to follow this activity and other activities. I stop sharing and I see what happened in the meantime. I see a lot of messages in the chat. So welcome again to all of you. I don't know, colleagues, if there was something, if everything was clear, if you heard everything more or less clear. I think I was roughly on time. And now I will give the floor to Rob Farrow from Open University UK for this context setting. I don't know, Rob, you're coming from higher education, but in my understanding, higher education is there to support skills development and to support personal development and employment. So I more and more tend to look beyond sector. So that's why actually we had the idea of this webinar focusing on lifelong learning, which is, I think it has been a buzzword for a few years now, at least from a European Commission perspective, is becoming more and more a reality. I don't know what are your thoughts. So let's see if we intersect open education and lifelong learning, what comes out. Up to you. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fabio. Yeah, interesting question. How does open education support lifelong learning? As you say, I am coming from a higher education perspective, but we have done some research around open education in non-formal contexts as well. I'd say I'm more of an open education person than a lifelong learning person. So we'll see whether we meet in the middle somewhere. Just briefly to introduce myself, I'm a senior research fellow at the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University in the UK. I lead the research program on open education for the university. Today I'm here in my ICDE role, so I'm co-chair of the ICDE Open Education Network. And one other thing I wanted to briefly mention is that I'm co-director of GoGN. This is the Global Open Graduate Network, which is a network of doctoral support for researchers working in the field of open education. It's especially for them, but anyone can join who wants to stay in touch with research and open education, and it's completely free to participate in. I've been doing open education research for more than 10 years now. And during that time, it's evolved quite a lot. And in some ways, you could say that the focus of open education has moved from, over the years, it keeps evolving. So at my own university, which started in the 1960s, the initial interpretation of openness was allowing people to participate in higher education without any prior qualifications. So anyone can come and study at the Open University. This was like the one of the first like concepts of openness in 20th century higher education. Although the idea of who has access to knowledge obviously goes back way further. What I understand by open education is it's a holistic approach to making knowledge and learning more available to more people. And that doesn't just include simply being able to access information. Increasingly, what we see in the last sort of 20 years or so is a move from just the resources themselves being the focus to what you can do with those resources and how it changes the cultures around learning and who can participate and how learning is structured. And sometimes people call these open educational practices, and I'll talk a bit more about these as we go along. Obviously, lifelong learning spans quite a broad range of possibilities. I would say the main thing around lifelong learning is that it's typically driven by the individual, and it can happen within formal contexts. That could be higher education, it could be a work or professional circumstances, and it can be completely nothing to do with those, and just learning for pleasure, learning to improve citizenship, employability, all these kind of things. So there's lots of different possible applications within lifelong learning as well. And in Europe, why lifelong learning is particularly important. Some of the drivers for this are, as technology advances, we need people to upskill, we need people to reskill, and that involves learning. And with demographic changes, such as an aging population, such as migration, we need ways to support those people as they're moving through different stages of life and existence. And more generally, there's an impulse to improve access to learning at a very general level right across the European area. So why is open education useful for this? You can use open educational approaches to reduce the cost of producing materials. You can open up new innovations such as localizing and translating resources. And you can also facilitate a kind of more proactive, empowered approach to learning, both from the individual learner and the people that support them. And this is something that's recognized in a whole range of European policies and action frameworks. And I won't go through all of these separately, but the whole idea underlying this is to create a kind of environment within the entirety of Europe, which is supporting people in education and training, in lifelong learning, not just in terms of reskilling, although that's often the framing for some of this stuff, but also in terms of just, quality of life, access to education being a fundamental part of European culture and being embedded across Europe in that way. It's also about taking advantage of the affordances of digital technology. And it's also about greater harmonization across Europe in terms of the systems of education, the systems of training, how those things are recognized and made interoperable and mutually recognized. And here we see things like micro-credentials coming in as a way of recognizing some of these informal learning activities in a way that can be made comparable across Europe. There are broader frameworks as well. UNESCO has a lot of stuff that supports open educational resources and different ways of applying open educational resources. The 2019 recommendation is the main one, and that sets out really a global agenda for integrating open educational resources. More recently, in 2024, there was the UNESCO Dubai Declaration, and there's two things I want to highlight there. One is the idea of open educational resources as digital public goods and a kind of new commons, which essentially makes OER a kind of a shared interest. And again, coming back to this idea of a sort of holistic, ecosystemic sort of approach, is the idea that OER should be there for everyone, for everyone's benefit. The other thing that the Dubai Declaration emphasizes is readiness for AI and the idea that AI can be a catalyst for open educational resources. And that's a theme that I will come back to nearer the end. Just to briefly say that these are not the only policies by any means. There's a whole range of different declarations and policies around openness, open science, AI, innovation. And so this is not happening in isolation. There's a whole framework, a web of these things and different frameworks. So you may be wondering, what are open educational resources? The normal definition people give is that they are materials used in teaching, learning, or research that are in any format. So they don't have to be digital, but they often are. And they're either in the public domain or they're released on an open license, of which Creative Commons is the most common example. And the different licensing options let you do different things with those resources without violating copyright. And these can apply right across the lifelong learning spectrum. So you can use OER at any age, in any circumstances. Essentially, anything can be an OER. It depends on how you use it and what kind of license it has. Specifically regarding those licenses, people sometimes talk about the 5 R's, being retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. And what this means is that you get different possibilities for how you can share things, how you can adapt them, how you can edit them, how you can make new things out of existing things, and so on. And essentially, it lets you get around all of the things that copyright stops you from doing, depending on the license. And so this gives people new freedoms in terms of just being able to access stuff at the most basic level. This would be retain. to reuse stuff, so to take them from one context and use them in another, to revise them, so to update them or translate them, to remix them, make something new out of them, and redistribute them. So so the licensing is what lets you do those things in those different ways. And I'm going to characterize that as a kind of potential for innovation. So the things that you can do with OERs that you can't do with copyrighted resources, that lets you innovate the practices around them as well. So things like open pedagogies, for instance, where you would sort of, rather than giving people a curriculum and saying, right, you learn this, it'd be more of a negotiation. What do people want to learn? How can you structure learning in a way that actually benefits them and is easiest for them, rather than sort of one size fits all, this is how you learn. And there's all kinds of things, around that we don't really have time to go into today, but we can pick up on it later if you want to. So not only do the licenses themselves kind of open up possibilities for innovation, but the whole idea of having more control over those resources, to write your own resources, to share them in different ways, that in itself creates a kind of space for innovation. So thinking more concretely about lifelong learning, what kind of things does this, lead to in practice? So one example is you can make degree level content available to people outside of higher education. And so OpenLearn, which is the OER repository at my university, has a wide range of content. I think 10% of every course is automatically published into OpenLearn as OER. But you can also start the process of working towards a degree with open educational resources. So you can kind of test, see if you like it, see if you feel comfortable doing it without necessarily joining a degree course and paying for the fees and etc. So people can have access to that kind of learning outside of higher education. It's one example. And that can be really useful for, depending on what stage you're at in your career, or, different possibilities like that. Another example would be around vocational and educational training, upskilling. And we know this is an issue in Europe generally. And so you get the example here of like MOOCs. There's all kinds of MOOCs. At the moment, there's lots of courses that you can take to learn about AI and develop AI skills, for instance. And all of those, not all of those courses are necessarily openly licensed. So, you could get into a question of where is this an OER and where is it not? But at the point of use, it's available. You can sign up for a course with, OpenAI or whatever, and they won't charge you for it. It doesn't mean that all the content is openly licensed though. But this is definitely an area where, resources can be put on open licenses and shared very broadly. And that lets national agencies across Europe distribute those, localize those, put them where they're needed. I briefly mentioned the micro-credentials. So here the idea would be to offer a system of open recognition for lifelong learning of all different kinds. Not necessarily so they can be recognized in terms of employability. That is an example, and it's an obvious use case for this kind of recognition. But you also, sorry, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you. So yeah, so it need not be purely for recognition in terms of career progression and upskilling, but it can be. And more broadly, there's the idea that you could offer people a way to have their lifelong learning recorded and recognized and kind of archived, so that they have that record of what they've done across their life. And that kind of system of recognition offers some validity to open approaches sometimes, but it's also trying to find a kind of spot in the middle where we have a common recognition of all the kinds of learning that people do. I would also say that in terms of innovation, because we can use open educational resources in different ways, that lets us support different forms of inclusion. So, for instance, we can translate them into all different languages without any permission needed from the copyright holder. But it also opens up different things, like for people with different learning needs, different ways of delivering stuff, you could adapt it for them. If they have accessibility needs, you can adapt it for those needs. You can make it so that it's, universal design and so on. And so it becomes easier to sort of plug a gap in terms of including people. But then the broader thing here would be you could also include people in the process of creating those materials as well. So they could be updated. You could, for instance, consult with people with disabilities and try to understand how to make your resources more accessible to them. And then you can build that into the design. And the whole workflow for that is much easier with open educational resources. There's another aspect here which would be to do with sort of galleries, museums, and libraries. Um, Libraries could be seen as open education hubs of a sort, and they certainly distribute content. They certainly provide a way to for people to access learning, especially sometimes if they're not particularly web literate or don't have good digital skills. Increasingly, I'll give the example here of Mozilla. Increasingly, people are using libraries as a way to promote and develop digital skills. And they sometimes can be people that would not necessarily attend a formal course or a formal institution. So there's a whole side here, which is, if you like, more on the kind of civic side rather than through higher education, where you give people opportunities to develop not just skills and literacies, but the ability to be a learner and to see yourself as a learner. Um, Another example of this kind on this kind of civic side would be something like Wikipedia. Um, but it's not the only example of what I would call something like citizen knowledge. There's also citizen science initiatives that are similar to this, where you would basically give people routes into engaging in knowledge production, which are totally outside of formal education systems. So something like Wikipedia, but there's other examples where, people working with open data sets, people doing different kinds of knowledge production, which is not really attached to a job necessarily, not really attached to studying, but very much a kind of civic activity. And you can see how this would be something potentially for some people very engaging. And I'm going to take the second point here first. If you are someone who's retired, who's looking for interesting things to do with your time, then these kind of knowledge production projects could be something of interest. Um, More generally, for senior learners, we're increasingly seeing learning content designed specifically for those audiences. So not just, oh, we wrote it for somebody else, but we might as well make it available to people who are retired, but things that are actually designed for them, maybe around digital skills, for instance. And again, it's the open nature of the approach, which is making that easier to deliver. And then just to take the top one here, there's a kind of an open educational practice around the way that you work, and you might say it's a more horizontal structure. You might say it's a kind of decentered approach, but open practices can support peer learning in a way that the more hierarchical approaches from formal education don't support in the same way. And we're seeing this increasingly kind of taking off in terms of professional development frameworks. And there's certainly an area that the EU is quite interested in supporting. Again, this kind of upskilling, reskilling, changing career, and maybe that being a sort of decentered process rather than something that's centrally managed and all the efficiencies that can come with that. So just returning to the Dubai Declaration for a second. As I mentioned before, there's this idea that digital public goods enable everybody to access education, and that this is more inclusive and more equitable. Um, there's a kind of vision in the Dubai Declaration of a kind of harmonized open ecosystem for lifelong learning. And that's a good thing, and you can see why that vision is there. Um, there are opportunities here for sure. As I've mentioned, translation, localization. This has a really, powerful potential to help people. Accessibility. Um, but also there's this idea that AI can be the thing that supports OER. And so you have here the idea of better use of metadata. So you can make an AI-powered recommendation system. You have, we already know loads of people are using GPTs and chatbots to support their own studies, to support their own inquiry, to support their own knowledge production and these kind of things. So there's an idea here that we could use AI to like do lifelong learning better, do OER better. And I'm not disagreeing with that exactly. I feel like it's a bit kind of bit simply put maybe in the declaration, because there are also some risks with AI in this space. So one is the idea that AI is fundamentally an extractive technology. It takes you feed it content, and then it takes that content. And essentially, that AI companies could end up with quite a lot of control over who has access to what and how much it costs. And so there's a risk there of creating a kind of enclosure for lifelong learning. You know, it depends on a lot of different factors, but I think the risk is still there. But another part here, because you could say, well, why do we need OER at all when we can just create whatever we want to with AI in 5 minutes? And the answer to that would be the quality of what you produce with AI is not necessarily what you need it to be. And it's hard for you to assess the quality if you're the kind of person who's using AI to create these things. OERs are normally peer reviewed. They normally have all the same attention put on them as you would find in a sort of formal education context. Another question here is, do we want to be dependent on AI companies for lifelong learning? Is that a risk? I would say it's probably a risk. So there's some tensions here. The Dubai Declaration says we should just make generative AI projects that respect open licensing, as if that's an easy thing to do. What we've already seen is that AI companies don't respect licensing at all, right? They don't care about copyright. They just train on whatever. And legally, that's still a grey area, even though case law is taking a very long time. You know, they're kind of slow walking through the courts to find out what AI companies are actually allowed to do. Similarly, there's this idea that whatever comes out of AI use should remain in the public domain or be openly licensed. At the moment, you can't put an open license on what comes out of a GPT because it's not copyrightable anyway if it's written by a machine. Again, these are legal questions, grey areas. But can we expect transparency from AI systems? I would say the answer is probably no, we can't. Not the way things are at the moment. And I'd also just note that there's this idea in the Dubai Declaration that we should have private companies really engaged with this idea of digital public goods, using AI, using openness. But they're expecting transparency from private companies. I'm not sure that's realistic because they work on a competitive model. Why would they be fully transparent? So I would say there's some tensions here, and there's some definite possibilities around AI, but there's also some unresolved questions. If you're interested in open education and AI, then I'm a co-author on this recently published paper, which you might find interesting. I'll put the link in the chat in a few minutes if you want to see that. So just to summarize, 3 key things that I wanted to get across. Firstly, open education is not just about content, it's not just about OER. It's a holistic approach. It's about rights, it's about inclusion, it's about an entire way that we approach how knowledge is created and shared in society. Secondly, there's very, very strong policy support for open education and lifelong learning. And these can be good anchors for all different kinds of activities. And in a way, we've reached a sort of point of maturity around that, which is really encouraging. And thirdly, I would just kind of make this point again around AI. It's really changing this whole thing of how we create and share knowledge. Maybe in some good ways, maybe in some bad ways, but it's definitely consequential, and we need to pay attention to what's happening around that. I just want to finish by drawing attention to this upcoming ICDE event. This is in February next year. This is the Lillehammer Lifelong Learning Conference. Lillehammer is a very nice place if you've never been. And there will be quite a number of people there who are very interested in these questions around lifelong learning. Many of them are also in the open education space as well. So if you want to connect with ICDE, consider coming along to the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Fantastic overview. And by the way, I attended the Lillehammer conference 2 years ago, and I invite everybody to be there. It's really one of these events where you really talk about lifelong learning and, let's say, impactful initiatives in a very open way, I would say, beyond the pure content and I would say also beyond the cliche. I appreciated very much how you were able to move away from the classic dichotomies. I see a lot of there are a lot of questions, a few questions in the chat. Some of these questions are, I would say, very contemporary. Some of the questions are the usual that are very correct. How can we convince people that open education is the way to go? How can we convince people, the more traditional mindsetters that that things need to change and so on. So, Rob, I suggest that you try to tackle these questions in the chat, because I would
Sure.
like to give the floor to the practices. Then we have time at the end. If after
Yeah,
having read that, you can then maybe want to comment, because I think some of these deserve a bit of a reflection. Do you agree?
no problem.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much again. I think you really put
Thank
it
you.
very nicely. And by the way, since your PowerPoint was just to make an example of the beauty of OER, your PowerPoint, I bet it is openly licensed. In 2
It is.
weeks, I have to speak about new actors in the open educational resources and open education field. So a couple of slides, I will simply get them from you, borrow them from you, put your name there so that they know who is the author, but I can do it without asking you, because this is the beauty of it. Of course, I will let you know. I'm telling you now, and I will drop you an email
You don't
because
have
it's
to. Yeah.
nice that knowledge flows, but it's perfectly legal. And this small thing is really changing now. I agree we need to go much beyond OER, but this small thing is the magic of sharing and the magic of actually collaborating, let's say, around legal ways of sharing knowledge. All right, now this is the context. Thank you very much to all of you for the questions. But as we do in these webinars, all the time we try to then speak about real life examples and cases, let's call them practices, cases, and the way you prefer. And we do this globally. So UNESCO, both UNEVOC and the Institute of Lifelong Learning are very global. ICDE is a global network. The ETF is looking beyond Europe. So we are not afraid of global. And I saw also in the chat people from, I would say, at least 4 continents. So it's quite good. Now we move to Korea. So the first case we are gonna listen to today is gonna be presented by Sang-Young Yang. I hope I pronounce it well, from CARIS, so principal researcher from CARIS, and also at the moment visiting researcher at the College of Lifetime Learning in the US. And actually, it seems from your bio that this is lifelong learning is really, let's say, your main main interest, your passion. So the case you're going to tell us about is the Korea Open Courseware and how this is supporting individual learners' needs. Sang-Young, floor is yours. You have 10 minutes, and I ask so that we can have some time for questions at the end. And I'm asking the participants in the meantime also to use the chat for questions. Floor to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I'm only seeing a black screen thus far.
No, sorry. Where is that? Try again.
No problem.
How about
Yes.
Yeah.
you see?
We can
Now
see.
we
Can
see.
you?
Yes.
It's still in preview mode or in edit mode. Make it full screen. It's okay. We can see them. Maybe if you can enlarge the screen. Good.
You can see? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Here is the morning. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sang Hyunja. I'm a principal researcher of Korea Education and Research Information Service. We call the CARIS. Our organization, CARIS, is under the Ministry of Education. And now I am currently a visiting scholar at the Center for 21st Century University at Georgia Tech in US. First of all, I'm happy to speak about Korea's experience of OER. And my title is Korea Open Courseware for Supporting Individual Learners' Needs. My presentation is divided with 4 parts. What do you think, first thing about Korea? As you may know, the rapid economic growth of Korea has gained worldwide attention. And the main driving force behind such remarkable growth is known to be Korea's enthusiasm for education. In 1953, immediately after the Korean War, Korea GDP per capita was just 67 US dollar, and by 2024, it had increased to approximately 36,000 US dollar, almost 541 times increase. And also, Korea is have some world-leading companies such as Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motors, and K-pop artists including BTS. And this result has been driven largely by human resource development and strong commitment to education, especially the proactive adoption of technology in lifelong learning from the early days of informatics to today's AI systems. Korea, this is a governance structure of education-related institute in Korea is as follows. Under the Ministry of Education, there are 2 institutes, our organization carries, and the National Institute for Lifelong Learning Education. The CARIS usually development policy of using ICT in education. I introduce our Korea's some structures. I introduce CARIS rule. Korea has 17 metropolitan and province offices of education, and approximately 10,000 schools from elementary to high school. And we have almost 340 universities. Especially, CARIS has several OER platforms and service. For example, EduNet is for K-12, gathering OER contents from 17 metropolitan province of education and school. And KOCW is for higher education and lifelong learning, gathering from University and Institute of Lifelong Learning. And RISS, we call the RIS. RIS is for researchers gathering paper and report from university library and digital paper database. Everyone, what do you think why we use ICT in education? For a long time, I have been engaged in the work of integrated ICT in education. It is an essential tool, especially in lifelong education. The reason why it is very overcome the economy and geography and temporary limitation inheritance in education. In particular, it facilitates upward social mobility and enable individuals to realize their personal growth. This slide presents the history of ICT in education in Korea. It was founded in 1996. Today, we are entering what some describes as the AI sapiens era, a period in which living without AI's assistance is becoming increasingly difficult. Every student teacher use Gen AI before or after classroom, also for lifelong learning. Now we live in AI era. The emergence of AI era has been driven by three major factors. The exponential growth of data, algorithm, and computer power. Together, these developments has accelerated the evaluation of AI at the pace that has never been done before. We are going to focus explosion of data. In education field, any data is helpful for education and training. And then the importance of OER is becoming increasingly important, and we need to pay attention to it. If you add AI technology, we can support to adult learner through personalized learning using AI. As you know, this is concept of OER and OCW and now MOOCs. As you can see, the history of OCW and MOOCs, actually OER is originally from OCW. KOCW first launched its service in 2008, and KMOOCs follows it in 2015 of Korea. And from now, I'd like to explain about KOCW detail. Korea also launched KOCW. In the beginning, OCW started with 200 courses that the Korea Domestic University opened. Most of the lecture material were developed with support from Ministry of Education. After that, we'll link the overseas OER lecture material, for example, TED and MIT, OCW, etc., and add lectures from Nobel Prize winners' lecture. And then we added Korean learning lecture, free talking university to do introduction courses like that. And we added distance university open courses in Korea. We have 21 online university. Until last year, 2025, we have accumulated approximately 20,000 courses and 350,000 materials, and total 240 universities and institutes related to lifelong learning upload courses and material on KOCW platform. Thus, I'd like to introduce some service menu. So we can search by 7 academic category. Lecture by university can also be searched, and it has been organized by specific thema, such as competency, to allow for easy access. For example, communication skill and collaboration skill related to lectures. And the personal lecture room on light to top area. I'm sorry, that is the Korean character. That is the domestic service, so we can have just a Korean version. And in the personal lecture room, I can manage the list of lecture I have taken and obtain a certification for my lecture history. We have also been issued digital badge since 3 years ago. And finally, I will explain the future of KOCW for individual learners. 3 years ago, we developed a system where AI recommended online lectures and curriculum according their situation. For example, for job changes and unemployed people, those hoping for certifications, especially women with career interruption, etc. So we will developing it into individualized service by connecting KOCW lectures with open lectures from other online university and Institute of Lifelong Learning. And finally, why we adopt AI technology in education is strengthens education effective for lifelong learning. AI aims to make education more equitable, more creative, more cooperative, more democratic, more customized, and more effective. That is all reason is the more individualized. So I want to emphasize the access model. Word access is from the Latin accedere, meaning to go beyond. That's it. I will conclude my presentation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Sang-Yoon. Very interesting, especially, let's say, the way you're moving from higher education into lifelong learning and really one by one individualized and personalized, let's say, opportunities. It's very interesting, and thank you, Max, for sharing in the chat a link to let's say, a longer explanation of the Korean Open Courseware platform that is actually one of the promising practices that have been collected by UNESCO-UNEVOC. Some questions are in the chat, and there are a bit of a few debates that I will pick up at the end about open washing, what is really open, what is not open. So some debates that also go beyond your presentation, Sang-Yoon, but very interesting. And let's stay with us for maybe some questions at the end. We now move to Germany, so we go backward in terms of time zone. We come back to the afternoon from the morning of Korea. And actually, before Rob was mentioning libraries, and I would say I typically call them unexpected learning places. So places where learning takes place, even if they are not, it is not the main mission of these places. And of course, cities considered as cities, as places where we live, actually are also places, I mean, can be learning places and can be learning cities. And so we move now to the case of the UNESCO Learning Cities Network and the case of Bonn specifically. So we have Edith Hammer and Birgit Rüker, who will tell us a bit the story of lifelong learning and OER from the point of view of actually a very beautiful city that is Bonn. So over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So if you allow me, I will start with a kind of introduction to the presentation that will then follow by Birgit. And so let me just briefly share my screen. I've only had a couple of slides. So what I would like to share as an introduction, maybe could you tell me if you can see the slide in presentation mode already?
We can see it. It's not yet in presentation mode.
Okay, it's a bit of a no. Sweet.
No. Guess it went to the wrong screen.
Okay. Yeah, not sure why.
Yes,
maybe
perfect.
now.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Edith Hammer, and I'm a program specialist at UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. And since many years now, I've been working in and for the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. And so I would like to give a brief introduction what we understand as a learning city and what open educational resources mean in the context of a learning city before then handing over to Birgit Rüker. Yeah, so this temple is basically the concept of a learning city as we understand it in UNESCO. And I think from this, it already becomes quite clear and visible how comprehensive we think about education and lifelong learning in the context of cities as an endeavor that lasts throughout life, that covers all education sectors, but also non-formal and informal learning spaces, as we already heard today as well. And just briefly, so if we talk about learning cities and how they are different from other cities, we see a strong foundation in the political will and the political commitment. So we see that it's a city that not only implements actions and promotes learning and provides resources to the citizens of the city, but has a coordinated strategy behind, and that is supported by a local government that actively involves diverse stakeholders that are engaged in lifelong learning, be it from educational institutions, but also from sports clubs, from the private sector, from civil society organizations, and so forth. And of course also provides the necessary resources in order then to promote lifelong learning in a broad scope of areas. And this is what we see in the major building blocks of a learning city, so that lifelong learning takes place within the formal education system, but also in families, in neighborhoods, in the workplace, facilitated through digital technologies, with high quality of learning and quality assurance of learning, and through this really creating what we call a culture of lifelong learning at the local level, and with the wider goals and benefits of contributing to sustainable development and to the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 4 and SDG 11. And then if we look into what is the Global Network of Learning Cities, which is coordinated by the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, and Bonn, the city that we invited today as well, is one of our member cities. So there are 425 cities in all UNESCO regions, in 91 countries that host one or more learning cities. And also in these cities live almost 500 million people who potentially benefit from the learning offers in their cities. And what are educational resources in the context of learning cities? So we've already heard in the introduction very comprehensively what we understand as our open educational resources. And in cities, I would say this is mainly providing the platforms and the tools for online learning, be it through online libraries, public Wi-Fi zones, e-learning portals, apps, but also, and very importantly, because we talk about digital education now so much, it's also the benefit of promoting lifelong learning in cities, that people can meet, that they learn in person, that they learn in natural places, in parks, in museums, community learning centers, but also I mentioned sports clubs already, or other social clubs. So learning in cities can really be fostered in a diversity of spaces. And then a third criteria I would mention is the municipal leadership. This is also what I mentioned earlier, that learning cities are about coordinated strategies, about planning and bringing different initiatives together and offering them in a systematic way. And one of these very, I would say, successful ways is also to run annual or biennial learning festivals, which we can see in several learning cities. And these are a really important momentum to create a culture of lifelong learning and to promote. I took note before of a statement made by Rob that OER is about the ability to be a learner and to see yourself as a learner. And I think these kind of initiatives really help to foster that joy of learning also in people. And just very briefly, 3 examples of what open education can mean in some of our member cities. So we have, for example, in Limerick in Ireland, as with other cities, lifelong learning festivals that offer, like in the case of Limerick, more than 200 events that are focusing on learning in the city for free. We have a very nice example of Windham in Australia offering what is called the Green Living Series, which are regular workshops offered by the city or by community stakeholders on bird watching, on waste management, on preserving parks and riverbeds and so forth. So really to promote sustainable practices. And yet another example from Edmonton, from Canada, which have designed the so-called Neighborhood for Climate initiative with a set of like a toolkit that is given to neighborhoods that includes climate action cards that helps neighbors to discuss the local issues, to take decisions together, to engage in the practice of climate action. So very nice initiatives that are made available by the cities to also promote action and lifelong learning in the cities. And one last open educational resource that I also need to promote a little bit is the monthly webinar series that we are offering within the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. Here are some of the upcoming editions. Feel free to sign up. They're open to everyone with more shared practices from cities on what they do to promote lifelong learning. And with that, because I'm cautious of the time, I would already like to hand over to Birgit Rücker.
Okay.
Birgit, I cannot hear you. I don't know if it's just me or...
No, I cannot hear you, Birgit. Now you are muted. Try to unmute yourself. You're still muted. Yeah, try now. No. We see you're muted, but we cannot hear you. Like if the microphone wasn't working. I don't know if you want to maybe try to get out and in again. And maybe we can have a sandwich presentation
Okay.
moving from.
Is it no?
Yes.
Better?
Now it's
Okay.
perfect. Good.
Sorry. I'm very
No worry,
apologize for this technical problem. So,
you're
okay.
getting used to
Now we
Zoom,
have the next challenge. How can I share my slides with you? I will try if it is possible. Oh, okay. Can you see my slides?
No.
Do you see a share button there? Ah,
Yes.
now it's coming.
Now we do.
Have you
Scanning,
seen?
Yes, perfect.
Good.
Perfect now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. You can see it?
We can see it. Go ahead and please try to take
So-
5 to 7 minutes because we are already running a bit late.
Okay, so
If possible. Thanks.
I'm very glad to give you a short insight in some practical activities of the UNESCO Learning City of Bonn. I'm Birgit Rücker, and I'm working in the Department of International Affairs and Global Sustainability. Maybe Bonn at a glance, we are over 330,000 residents from over 180 countries. We are Germany's United Nations cities with 27 UN entities in Bonn, and the motto of the UN Bonn is shaping a sustainable future. We are a hub for sustainability and the global goals, and since 2022, we are a member of UNESCO Global Networks of Learning Cities. And the motto of the Learning City Bonn is building sustainability in Bonn on books, on books, bytes, and people. So, and now we'll show you some examples. One example is a short digital offer like the Info Lunch, Us and the 70 Goals. Can you see the correct slide now? Because I can't see it. Okay, great.
Yep.
So it's an in-house training series for the city, not the city council, but for the administration staff, city administration staff, and it is on the our first municipal sustainability strategy, which was adopted in February 2019, and 2 months later in April, we started this training series, and colleagues present and discuss their contributions to our first sustainability strategy with one another. We offer a info lunch event once a month. It's always from 12:30 to 1:15 p.m. It's always about 25 minutes information and discussion. It's fully digital, and now it's successfully running in its 8th year. And so this is an internal offer for city administration staff. And as a citywide offer, we have the so-called Tea Time Education. It's a digital event with discussion always from 5 to 6 p.m. It takes place once a month, but a bit irregular. And in the focus is staff in the education sector, but it is also open to anyone who is interested. And the main topic of this digital series is education for sustainable development in Bonn. And each session introduces ESD stakeholders and activities in Bonn. This was then I chose a very different example. It's a so-called Garden of Education. This garden is on the grounds of the House of Education, which is the home to the Central Library and the Adult Education Center in the city center. And before it became a garden, it was a parking space. The garden was created in 2020 or 21 over the course of 6 4-hour workshops under the guidance of a gardener. And the participants were trained to become garden ambassadors. This was free, the workshops. And the participation was announced as a Learning City project. And since the garden was created, there are open garden and beekeeping meetups, and there's no registration required, and they are free of charge, and they are open for anyone who is interested in tending the organic vegetable garden. And in addition, we have paid workshops, but the open meetups are free for everyone. The third example, I think it's very similar what Edith mentioned from the city Edmond in Canada. It's a so-called climate districts, because in November 2019, our city council decided that Bonn should become climate neutral by 2035. And in March 2033, the city council adopted the Bonn Climate Plan, which is a roadmap. It sets out goals and measures through 2034. And the 4 climate districts are a part of the Bonn Climate Plan. And the concept for these districts emerged from the large-scale participatory process Bonn for Future, in which 100 randomly selected citizens developed recommendations on climate neutrality. Among other things, they recommended opportunities to get involved right on your own doorstep. And so the climate districts are aimed at people in the neighborhoods and to anyone interested. They offer, for example, solar energy consulting, of course, for free, bicycle repair shops, opportunities to get involved, spaces for citizens' ideas and initiatives, and more. They are centrally coordinated by the Citizen Participation Unit, and this office has sought out and established local institution in each climate district to assume the contractually defined roles of the operating entity. And 3 climate districts have a community center serving as a contact point, and 1 climate district has a climate mobile that travels through the city and to inform people in that way. Next. Next and last example is Polilino Bonn. This is a project by the City of Bonn's Inclusion Office and the Digital Transformation Department. And since January 2025, the City of Bonn has been offering all children in Bonn, as well as all municipal schools, kindergartens, and daycare centers, free access to the Polilino Picture Book app. Bonn is the first and so far only German city to offer free access to this Polilino app on this scale. Some informations, maybe this Polilino app may be interesting for other cities as well. It's very easy to use. It provides easy access. The German edition, I have to add, it provides easy access to over 1,700 children books for reading aloud or listen to. It's suitable for children and families, and here in Bonn we offer 18,000 free private licenses for families in Bonn. The Polilino edition for educational institutions provides additional features. And very important, in addition to the picture book text, the app also offers an audio file for each book. And these audio files are available in over 17 languages for many, many books and more to come. So, and currently around 20 books are also available in Sin language. And for some books, the texts are also available in various languages. So this tool is not only for children, but it's very interesting for adults who work with it, and it's a very interesting tool to learn languages. And the app is constantly being updated, and I have added the contact details as everyone interested to get in touch with the app developer. The main seat is in Stockholm, in Sweden, but there's also a representation in the UK, in the USA, and there's also the address of my colleague who manages the project in Bonn. So, thank you for your Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both of you. Very interesting. You also see some questions in the chat, including one question whether similar things exist in Stockholm. I don't know if Stockholm is also a learning city, but feel free to browse the chat and respond directly. Thanks a lot.
I will do.
Again,
thank you.
again, many examples how learning can take place outside schools and education institutions. Now we go back to an education institution and we go south. So we move from Bonn to Beirut, from Germany to Lebanon, and I welcome Fazi Baroud, who is quite known to the open education and open educational resource community as one of the champions from the South Mediterranean and Middle East region, who will tell us about a national initiative, actually, specifically working on open educational resources and open education from a lifelong learning perspective. So I'm very curious to hear about that. Fazi, try to stay within 10 minutes so we can have a bit of time for discussion at the end. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And joining you from Beirut, Lebanon right now carries a lot of weight. It is a deeply painful and uncertain time here. But being part of this community reminds me why we do what we do. Even when the world feels like it's closing, and open education keeps the doors open. Today, quickly, with the time remaining, I know we're a negative time. That's what Max was saying. That I will walk you through my journey from higher education to K-12, and I will talk about briefly about the work we still have ahead of us here in Lebanon with respect to lifelong learning and the TVET sector in Lebanon and in the wider area. And by the way, just say hello to, I see a lot of friends and colleagues from Palestine, greetings to you all, marhaba la jamia. So, actually, I come from a private institution in Lebanon. It's called Notre Dame University, and I am the UNESCO shareholder for OER, for access and success. Let me just briefly give you an idea about, the context of higher education institution in the region. As you can see from this slide that, we have a diversity, I call it an impressive diversity of those institutions, where they differ, if you look at the slide, they differ by sector. We have public versus non-public. Well, by the way, this applies to a lot of countries in the region, in the Arab region. We have, universities, by affiliation, attached to the Ministry of Higher Education, some other ministries, by status, universities, colleges, by type, we have traditional, open, virtual university, by cultural reference, Islamic versus Christian versus non-religion universities, so on and so forth. The thing is, but the question is, how about OER? If we look at OER umbrella in Lebanon and in the MENA region, what we know so far, little information exists regarding the awareness of the perceived utility of open educational resources in teaching, learning, and research. And another point is available data that we have on OER in higher education institution is I call it distinctly scant. Only a superficial picture of OER in terms of users, content, adoption, producers, so on and so forth. And we have another deficit, which I call lack of inter-regional collaboration and information exchange in our region or in the MENA region. And also we have a culture of protecting learning and teaching resources behind firewalls. Okay, so that's why I say, the password dominate this landscape. You need a password to access this LMS, or you need this password to access this website. Okay, so this is briefly what's happening in our region. But I would like to start, about how did I start myself in 2014. How did I start the journey? I participated in what we call, what was called back then the Open Book Project, and it was jointly organized by the Department of State and Creative Commons and Alexo. And the objective of this project was to take a couple of educators from the Middle East, we were about 15, so that we understand what's open education, what's OER, so on and so on. So the objective of this project was awareness, a localization to support the creation of Arabic content, okay? And of course, capacity building for governments, educators, students, so on and so forth. Coming back to Lebanon from this trip where I spent almost 1 month in the United States, I brought what I have learned in the US, and this is, if you look at this slide, I started with an awareness campaign, a wide campaign at my university, by giving almost on a daily basis workshop about open education, OER, about Creative Commons licenses, so on and so forth. And next, I move, to engage faculty and staff, student, and most importantly, I did a lot of training for our librarian, because the library is one of the pillars in higher education institution for open education and open licenses. And then what we did is we launched a pilot project for around 500 students, at the Faculty of Humanities. It was an English course with multi-section, and the results that we received from students and the questionnaire was amazing. And then what we have done, after this pilot, we expanded this scope to other faculties at the university. For example, if you take this as one course, it's a computer course where, we did create a complete course for 2 sections in computer, introduction to computers. And because we believe that the textbook cost was too high for our students, and we wanted to replace those imported textbooks with what we call a zero-cost textbook. And it was also a very successful experience, where if you look at the impact, 44% of the students that they took this course, they said that we rarely or never purchased textbooks. As for the delivery, 84%, highly rated the presentation of the OR in the interactive score format. What we have done is we have designed, a score format file, and it was integrated in our learning management system, which is called Blackboard. As for the quality, 86% rated the academic quality of adopting open educational resources as good or very good. Like one of the students down there, saying using OER was great because I could save money on textbook. I found that the use of OER helped a lot with understanding the information. So if we want to evaluate the pedagogical shift between traditional textbooks and this specific course, is, talking about the cost barriers, talking about the format, access, faculty control, equity focus. You can see the difference, from the textbook cost in the publisher to zero cost to student. When it comes to format, moving from static monolithic print to interactive chunk multimedia via score, so on and so forth. So now this is what's happening at my university. So we said, okay, that's fine. That's not enough. Why don't we move to the national level? And that's where, you know, my university signed a memo of understanding with the CERT, Center for Education, Research and Development. And those people are the right arm of the Ministry of Education and Higher Education in Lebanon. And they are in charge of designing and creating the official K-12 textbooks. So what we have done, you know, for so many years now, we of course, I did a lot of capacity building awareness campaign for their trainers, okay? We formed a committee to develop a policy, and now we have a policy at the national level, and this policy, it's in English and in Arabic. We have developed for them what we call a quality guide for creating open education resources. And then also there is also a guide for them how to produce OER. And now they have a digital repository for all materials which are created by teachers in K to 12. And then moving from the national level, we do a lot of collaboration and a lot of project with the countries in the region, mostly in Egypt, you know, like framework, the ICT CFT framework implementation. We developed a complete OER course, which is an online course. And then moving from the national, from the regional level, you know, like my university now is part of a network which is called the UNITWIN on Open Education, or it's known as the UNO network. And this is a very professional, very important network that we are part in. And, you know, this is for knowledge sharing, community building, for different type of research activity, so on and so forth. Now, the question is, what's happening in TVET in Lebanon, and how we can rewire the workforce, you know, in the technical and vocational and education training. If you look at this slide, you know, we have done some work in the higher education. We have done some work in the K to 12, but the loop is broken. The lifelong learning loop here is broken because we still need to do a lot of work on the TVET sector, okay? Usually, this is something that we were planning to do, but because of the situation, the work about the budget, finance, and stuff like that, we didn't start working in this sector. But looking at Lebanon, some demographic about Lebanon, we have around 1.14 million between age 15 and 24. 93% of those students, they attend regular K to 12 or primary education versus 5.3% they attend TVET programs. And this is a knowing number, and there are so many causes for this. Why? Because we have so many challenges in the TVET sector, from socio-economic barriers to structural deficit to the governance of the TVET sector, so on and so forth. I'm not gonna go through all of these deficits, but this is what's happening in this sector. But, you know, if I want to design from my experience in higher education and from the K to 12 sector, this is something I'm suggesting, a framework for TVET and the lifelong learning centers in Lebanon, talking about awareness and capacity building. Another pillar is we need to formulate policy at the national level. We need a quality assurance framework, which does not exist yet in Lebanon. And of course, we need to create a community of engagement, linking the lifelong learning TVET educator directly to what I call the private sector. And this is, you know, I have an implementation roadmap for what we are planning to do, from situation analysis to piloting some programs in TVET institution or lifelong learning center. And then, of course, at the last phase, we need to establish a monitoring and evaluation mechanism for what we are doing. So usually...
Fazi, sorry,
Yes.
Fazi. You can
Yes.
come to a close, so we have just a final round of discussion. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. So this is my last slide. And thank you so much, Fabio, for giving me that time. And my apologies for being a little bit late.
Oh,
Thank
no.
you.
My apologies for stopping you. Actually, you know, I'm a very bad moderator because I'm so interested in what you all say that I tend to follow.
No
But anyway,
problem.
everything was very interesting, and congratulations also for the story, even the personal story from the individual level actually to the country level. So that's great. And I will be speaking to you about this idea of TVET at the country level, which is open education in TVET is very, very important. We have 4 minutes now. So in 4 minutes, it's impossible, I think, to have a broad discussion, but I would like to give the floor for really 1 or 2 sentences to all the speakers, starting with Rob. And actually, I think the broader question that is coming out is this about let's say, the competition between proprietary education or non-open education or open-washed education and learning and real open learning and open education. And when we move into the lifelong learning spectrum, so outside the walls of, let's say, education and training institutions, things become a bit more blurred. So it's not so easy to distinguish between something that is accessible, that is really open, that is replicable, and so on and so forth. So my question for you would be, keeping in mind the inclusion drive, the inclusion objective, that is also was a main concern throughout the chat. We have our colleagues from Palestine, of course, first of all, but also many others are talking about, really inclusion, learners inclusion as the polar star of this question and of our work. Keeping this in mind, how can we make sure that when we go beyond the walls of education institutions, it doesn't all blur down to some kind of open, but not real open? Rob, sorry.
Thank you. So quite a lot of stuff you could unpack there. I'd just start off by saying the more open you make something in terms of licensing, so for instance, putting it in the public domain or put it on a CC BY license, and you give more power to other people to use that resource, the more freedom you put onto it, the greater the chance is that someone uses it in a way that you don't like, right? And there are options for Creative Commons licenses where you could say, I don't want someone to use this for commercial reasons, right? So you have that option, but it's less open, right? So you can have more control, but you make it less open when you do that. And there are always going to be companies who will take openly licensed content and try and sell it, and they're perfectly free to do that if you're working at the highest level of openness. And so there's a trade-off there where you could say, well, why is it just one person's vision of what it means to be open, right? Openness, in a way, should allow for lots of different possible interpretations. But at the same time, openness is something that we have to protect at some level from commercial interests. We have to make space for openness. I think during the COVID-19 pandemic was a very interesting example of this, because at one level, it's a perfect opportunity for open education. All of these institutions moving online, teaching online, they need resources to do this. Did we see massive uptake of OER? No. Why not? Because the commercial companies can move quicker, they've got more resource, and they're more able to market what they do. And there's just greater awareness of what they do. They spend a lot of money to make sure that their resources are the ones used. So there's always going to be a tension there. There's always going to be a pressure there like that. The way that I would encourage people to think about openness is it's not a binary. It's not open or not open. There are many different ways in which you can be open. And in a way, it's the inclusiveness is the most desirable thing. So if you make processes inclusive, if you find ways to bring in lots of different perspectives in the way that you produce and use educational materials, that's the helpful kind of openness. And that's getting closer to what I've tried to characterize as a kind of holistic approach, rather than just looking at a resource and saying, what kind of license does it have on it? But thinking more about the behaviors that such licenses can enable and promote.
So let's say enabling inclusion regardless of the etiquette you're giving to the label you're giving, to the openness label you're giving. Okay, seen from the point of view of a country, we start from FASI, from a city. I hope Birgit is still with us, and from a, let's say, a process or actually a platform like the Korean one. How does this sound? Do you think we can move beyond your beautiful initiatives that are very successful? In many cases, they are stable. Some of these of your initiatives are there since a few years. But now also with the advent of AI, which is, as it was said in the chat, changing a bit the paradigm, not only, the small things, it's really changing the way people interact with technologies and with knowledge. The question would be, can we say that we don't really care about the label of openness, and as long as we move towards enabling inclusion? Is this in your radar of your initiatives? Fazi, let's start from you.
Well, from my experience, and I guess this is, I can see it in a lot of countries. We need more support. The thing is, and if you look at the chat, the colleagues in Palestine, they need support, they need finances, they need so many things. And believe it or not, Fabio, that what you have seen, because I believe in openness, and I know what open and sharing, what does it mean, and I'm passionate about it. All this work that I've done, including OER Lebanon, it was done on from me as individual. What we need, is at the national level, for example, we need an umbrella, and this umbrella is the Ministry of Education and Higher Education, okay, which we don't have yet in Lebanon. We have done this project at the K-12, at the developing textbooks and stuff like that. We train them. Now they have policy. It's not but at the national level. It is at this specific entity which we call the SERP. So this umbrella is not yet available, and this is one major problem that let's say I'm facing in Lebanon. Even though at my university now we have a culture of openness. If you go to you see people, because I've done a lot of work here, a lot of training, and you see people, but we still, if we want to open our courses or whatever instructor, we need a policy at the highest level, and this policy is not yet available, because you need the permission of the institution, so that whatever material or courses you develop, like this example I gave, we cannot just say, well, it's now on Blackboard and you need username and password, put it open somewhere on a platform. We don't have the permission to do so yet. So this is a major obstacle.
Okay, going backward, Birgit, do you see this umbrella, this policy umbrella or ecosystem in Bonn?
Oh, sorry, I have to leave because I have a next meeting. Yes, but
Just a flash.
Just a flash. I think maybe what I tried to present was my example was that this is also very important to focus on informal education measures and on civil society, which is a really important tool in or a really important power in our city. So we have a lot of informal information or informal education offers, and they are running besides political frame. But to have a good political frame, of course, it's very, very important.
Thank you, and thank you for staying 5 minutes more. I promise that we will be close in 2 minutes. Just the word going backward to Sang-Yoon.
I think it is important to inclusion of OER. I said we overcome the limitation of education, traditional education. Actually, in Korea, private education cost is extremely high. So we have some cost, the economy divide and digital divide like that. So to prevent the widening of educational disparities, the active investment of both of government and NGO is essential. Especially OER is important to spread nationwide and worldwide, like UNESCO strength effort, and also even though Korea is a geometrically small country, but significant gap persists between urban and city and rural area. Such resources are particularly indispensable for students who choose to prioritize work first and pursue their study later. So I think the good and essential tool for OER for individual learners. So, and also I emphasize to advanced technology, for example, AI. So AI can support to individualize. So we should have to develop the platform through upload the OER resources. So I want to collaborate globally, exchange each country have education resources. So I suggestion the UNESCO, we make a initiative to globally exchange the OER platform linked project. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, and now I have the feeling that we started a lot of this, well, a few discussions, and we have no time to bring them forward. So I would suggest that, first of all, I would like to thank the speakers. I think you provided very insightful ideas and examples. I would like to thank Max and also for hosting this webinar technically from UNESCO-UNEVOC. I would like to thank Birgit and Edith from UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning and the colleagues from ICDE, also the secretariat, apart from Rob. And actually, so the way we will the page where we will post the recording and the presentations allows for comments. So the best idea that I can think about now is, together with the presentations, I will also put in these comments a few of the questions that remained unanswered. I know they are difficult questions, most of them, so that we can, let's say, have the discussion in that page and at least propose ways to go forward. I've seen some collaboration ideas, embryonal collaboration ideas emerging in terms of networks, international and national. So I think we all deserve apart from possibly a good coffee, but we all deserve actually some time for discussion, maybe once we have digested the presentation. So thank you for having stayed with us 10 minutes more. I'm sorry for not having allowed for more discussion, but I promise that this discussion will take place on the webpage of the event in a few days from now. Thank you very much to all of you, and have a good afternoon or day or evening, depending on where you are.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Fabio, for the moderation and always for all your work in organizing these and saying, let's do our next webinar. So in that sense, I'm looking forward to our next OER webinar.
Pleasure. Bye.